a lot of us were excited. Some of us even saved our finances once we went to Dubai, or some of the people who went to Egypt. Some people stored their resources just to attend this COP, yet this COP did not deliver as much progress as expected.
Negotiators are now filing out of Belém, Brazil, after 2 tense weeks that were meant to define the next decade of global climate action. COP30 was billed as the COP of truth and implementation, but that didn't seem to come easy, as the event faced numerous logistical challenges from the indigenous protesters who stormed the conference, claiming to have been sidelined and denied their social rights, a rather glaring contradiction for a COP that was called an indigenous COP, not to mention a dramatic fire outbreak that forced delegates to evacuate the building, an occurrence that was also described as an apt metaphor for COP30's catastrophic failure to take concrete action to implement the fossil fuel phase out. Many, of course, have left Brazil, to be disappointed, as the final decisions that were offered on the 22nd of November were claimed to be inadequate responses to the shortfall in national climate commitments. Although the conference took place in what's called the gateway to the Amazon, the COP30 failed to deliver new plans to end deforestation. Critics say that COP30 delivered an empty deal, one that falls far short of the magnitude of the crisis, especially for the most vulnerable who are already living on the front lines of the climate extremes. But I'll be unpacking much more on all of this into what really happened in Belém with Navin Malhotra, sustainability professional, and Gertrude Thaler, gender and climate justice advocacy specialist. It's a pleasure to have you both on the program. I'll start with Gertrude. How are you doing today, Gertrude?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry, I think there was something with my audio. I'm really glad to be here. I'm doing well. I'm back from Belém, back to Africa. I'm excited. The weather is okay, and I'm feeling well.
It's good to have you back. So let us know, of course, like you said, you just came back from the conference in Brazil. So I want you to start off by describing your overall experience and analysis of the COP30. You were there live. What was the air like? What were the negotiations like, the conversations, the people? Just a little bit on the total experience of COP30 for you.
This COP was different. I've been to 3 COPs so far. I was in Dubai, I was in Baku, and I was in Belém, and this COP started off very slow. For the first few days, I arrived on 11th, and for the first few days, you could barely see Africans, so to speak. Started very slow for for my own country. A few of the negotiators were on their way for another 2 to 3 days. Yeah, so that's how it started. The mood was a bit off for me. But in terms of the negotiation, I think we had more expectations that what this COP delivered. A lot of us were excited. Some of us even saved our finances once we went to Dubai, or some of the people who went to Egypt. Some people stored their resources just to attend this COP, yet this COP did not deliver as much progress as expected. Yeah, so I feel like it fell short of our expectation, and in as much as it delivered some progress, some little progress, it fell short of justice.
All right,
so that's my general analysis.
Yeah, all right. So let me also hear from Navin as well. What was your overall analysis of COP30, looking at the decisions that were made and, of course, the final negotiations? Just a bit on your overall analysis of COP30.
Sure. Though I was looking at COP30 miles apart, sitting in India. But I would say that, from the climate finance perspective, it brings a lot of changes and a lot of promises on the ground because of, formalizing at least $1.3 trillion a year in climate finance by 2035 to support the developing countries, which was really unprecedented. But then again, as we are discussing that, despite all these mounting climate science warnings for the catastrophic risks, the conference failed to finalize a firm fossil fuel phase-out roadmap, which reflects long-standing tension among all the major emitters.
All right, and I mean, you've started mentioning a bit on some of the outcomes. So I want us to just continue a bit on that. What would you say was the most critical outcome that has emerged from COP30 for you?
I would say that the Belém package, which was more of a comprehensive set of decisions which secure the pathway, as I just mentioned, about $1.3 trillion annually. It also helps in targeting around $300 billion per year as a public finance. And this also coupled with commitments to double adaptation finance by 25 and triple by 2035, plus some of the operational rules for the loss and damage fund agreed at COP28. But then again, we need to see how these numbers will materialize actually on the ground, when they start getting into the implementation part.
All right, thank you so much. And let me also hear from you, Gertrude, as well. What would you say was the most important outcome that emerged from COP30 for you?
Bearing in mind that Africa's priority is adaptation, considering how much finances we need for that and how much we spend, you realize that less than a third of the climate finance goes to adaptation. So tripling adaptation finance is very important for us, but also gender action plan. I was following a lot on the gender negotiation, and we've been really pushing for the development of the gender action plan. And we were hoping that by this COP we'll have one. Also, as a lot of the things we were pushing for in the text, quite a number of them have been omitted, but I'm glad that we have a gender action plan. So the two.
Okay, and you're already speaking a bit on adaptation, so let me just leech onto that. This year's COP was shaped up to be the implementation and the adaptation COP rather. But although we see that the nations that were at COP30, yes, they agreed to triple funding for adaptation, but some still say that there was a refusal to commit to scaling up finance to the necessary $300 billion annually. So to what degree would you say COP30 achieves the goal of adaptation and implementation, especially for the African countries that are most vulnerable to these climate crises?
I think just the decision to triple adaptation finance was good, but that by itself is not enough, because then there's other finances that are needed to ensure that adaptation is, or rather, communities are able to adapt. So there's the loss and damage finance. There's also really ensuring that there's also other means of implementation, technology, capacity building. So to an extent, yes, but a commitment without ensuring that the commitment are actually the finances reaches the community at the grassroots is not enough. So I don't think this COP entirely delivered on ensuring implementation. There was I think politically it lacked political goodwill, and we know that is based also on the fact that some of the countries were also missing in some of these negotiations. Yeah.
Come to Navin. I also want to hear what he has to say, because as we know, the US did not send a delegation. We've seen how Donald Trump has dismissed the climate crisis as a con job, and that also kind of cascaded down to major leaders, including China and India, who were reportedly absent. So how do you think their absence in any way impacted the achievement of substantive decisions?
Well, it's a good point, Tony, that the absence of these top leaders from US, China, and India have significantly weakened the high-level political impetus at COP30 because they are the world top emitters, and their direct engagement is essential for consensus building or the contested issues, especially the fossil fuel phase-out and transition frameworks. But if we look at the steps taken up, say specifically in India, because I'm here and I can see the changes specifically in the solar power generations. So where whatever targets which we have set for ourselves for 2030, we were able to meet in this year itself, which shows that firm actions are being taken on the grounds. But of course, their absence arguably made it harder to bridge the divides and inject the urgency around the energy transition. So I totally agree on that.
Okay, I also want to hear Gertrude on that. Do you think that the absence of these major leaders in any way affected the achievement of substantive decisions at the conference?
Amazing. I also agree that the absence of the likes of China, USA, and India contributed quite a bit to the negotiation, especially when it comes to the ambitious mitigation outcomes, because then if we don't have the big emitters in the house, we could be singing to the choir. So you realize that the outcome, there was absence of political pressure, there was absence of the fossil fuel phase out in the final text, and there was more leaning towards adaptation, just transition, and these other things. Yet we know very well that climate crisis is caused majorly by fossil fuel. And if we don't have that in the text, then I wonder what we were trying to do if we are not trying to cut on emission as the main contributor to the climate crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're speaking on the fossil fuel phase out, and of course, from reports that we've seen is that, of course, we've seen that from the agreements there was no final agreement on the phasing out of fossil fuels. And looking at the way the negotiations were, it seems as though this was mainly from the pushback from the petro states that were at COP30. So I want you to just paint a picture for us exactly how what played out. Whether it was trade tensions and the influence of petro states in pushing back on the fossil fuel and transition roadmaps. What was that like at the conference?
I believe that there was some tension for sure, and you could see when it came to actually in some of the negotiation there was mention on trade more than there was mention on fossil fuel. And even fossil fuel phase out. And clearly, the negotiators felt that if they lean towards mentioning, rather not mentioning fossil fuels phase out, then that would had a repercussion on the trades. And I think, as I was saying, that in some negotiation there was more mention of the fossil fuel, of trades and carbon tariffs more than there was mention on fossil fuel phase out. And I think that then hindered the final outcome, especially on the text, when it comes to clearly stating that there should be fossil fuel phase out.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. Now, let me come back to Navin. And speaking on the fact that we were not able to reach a final decision on the fossil fuel phase out, looking back to the commitments that countries made at COP28. Now, this has brought major argument on COP conferences like this. A lot of people say that it has become more performative than substantive because we have leaders come together, they make bold claims, and we hardly see those commitments come to the light of day. So I want to know, what are your thoughts on that? Would you say that the COP conference is maybe no longer, working in its purpose, because all of these decisions made, they keep coming back the next year, and we see that they didn't meet the ambitions. None of these commitments that were made have been fulfilled, or at least major of them. So would you say that the COP conference is no longer fit for its purpose? And would you also see COP30 in that light, whereby we had leaders gather with so much high expectations and we saw very low outcomes? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so if we look at historically, COPs oscillate between, say, symbolic declarations and substantive climate action. COP30 was more practical than many previous sessions, especially finance-wise, industrializing delivery mechanism and move beyond the platitudes. Again, compared to COP28, ambitious rhetoric on ending fossil fuel era and COP29's shift in finance goals. So COP30 did focus on implementation accelerators and concrete funds on loss and damage. But again, like before, it struggled with final agreements on fossil fuel phase outs, reinforcing the tension between, say, performative declarations and the difficult politics on the ground. So COP30 was a procedural step forward, but still reflective of the half full, half empty nature of international climate diplomacy, which you just pointed out as well.
I mean, you seem to be speaking from, you've been speaking from very positive light, and I mean, I like that. We like to have a balanced view, but a lot of people would still say that COP30's final agreement, they still fall very far short. A lot of people say they left there disappointed, even as Gertrude said, expectations were high, and, what the outcomes seem to be very low. And so in the midst of this, it seems as though it's just the same pattern. This was what happened at COP29 as well, where we had very high expectations. It was supposed to be a finance COP, but then what came out was still very low. So you said COP30 has made some progress. So just for those that might seem as though not much has happened, what kind of progress can we say has come out from COP30 that shows that, yes, we are moving forward towards reaching our climate ambitions?
Okay, so I would say that, as we speak about that COP30 was positioned as an implementation COP, it did made tangible progress by creating new tools like Belém mission to 1.5 degrees and sectoral coalition to accelerate NDC delivery, moving beyond just the promises. Yet, while the finance framework and coordination platforms were maturing, the pace of actual fossil fuel phase-out policy and NDC enhancements remains very slow. So essentially, COP30 laid the groundwork and architecture, which maybe previous COPs also did. But the real test will be visible in the country level policies and investor action in the coming years. So that always remains a challenge.
I want to know if you agree with that line of thoughts. And what are your thoughts on that? Looking at the groundwork that COP30 has laid for further engagements on meeting the climate ambitions, how much of a positive outcome would you say has come out of COP30?
I also think it's a balance, or probably there are a bit of positives. Looking at the gender action plan, as I mentioned before, we have the adoption of the GGA indicators, the Global Goal on Adaptations. There's the launch of the Just Transition Work Program, Article 9.5 reporting. We had the tripling of the adaptation finance. But when you look on the other side of the coin, as well, we have no negotiated fossil fuel phase out, and that again lacked in the text. We had finance targets, the tripling of the adaptation finance. It lacked clear baseline and pathways, and also it was basically the COP was substantially weak, like politically. Also taking into consideration some of the parties not being there and not being supportive of the decision. So I think for me, looking at it, it's a balance. We've had far worse COPs, but I think it's our expectation that is making us feeling like it fell short. But there was a little bit of some progress if you compare to the previous COP.
Okay. And I just want to speak on some of the outcomes, just a few of them, towards the end of negotiations. Let me just redirect the question to Navin. If you could just tell us a bit about what the Brazilian president, the package that the Brazilian president released that was termed the Global Monterrey. What's that all about, and what can we expect from that particular one?
Well, I just spoke about the Belém package, which is, mainly about that 1.3 trillion dollar target by 2035. It did help us in, giving a major scale up in climate finance compared to all the previous commitments, like $100 billion pledge of COP21, which was not enough at all to do the climate financing. However, the details of the sources, whether it will come from public, private, bilateral, and the mechanisms on how to track that and verify this finance are still works in progress, because this is very important. Again, the promises versus the implementation part, which we still have to see. But then I would say that the part of the Belém package, which talks about a larger sum of money which is available, but we need to see how it will going to get operationalized and make those differences. And of course, most important thing would be the accountability as well, that who is accountable for it to work on those various projects.
Thank you so much, Nathan. So as we wrap up, I just want to get your final thoughts. Looking back on the outcomes finally, would you say COP30 was a success or a failure from your point of view?
It could be a question around the experiences which people have. Like Gertrude was right there in Belém, and she was able to see it beforehand. Whereas I'm sitting millions of miles apart. Whatever news I'm getting, I'm able to make those decisions on that. But I would say that it was a partial success. Formally anchoring the finance commitments and implementing the frameworks. Yet a setback again on the fossil fuel phase out, which is very, very critical for meeting 1.5 degree. And it advanced the global climate architecture, but underscored again the persistent political divides which we have and the delays which we have on the fossil fuel part. So its legacy still depends on whether countries translate those finance and implementation promises into rapid emission cuts in the coming years. So again, as I said, it all depends on how we implement what have been promised in the COP30.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Navin. And let me also hear Gertrude's final thoughts on that. From your perspective, would you say COP30 was a success or a failure?
A success, but not the kind of success that we expected. I think our hopes are quite high. I think it's time we also train our, I don't know whether it's our heart and mind to manage our expectation, to have higher ambitions, but really to know how to manage our expectation. But also, as Navin has said, it really depends on how the implementation will go about. We have a lot, the tripling of the adaptation fund, and as someone who works with the community, that looks like looking at how then that will trickle down to the community. We now have the gender action plan, looking at how then that will be domesticated in our context and how we'll benefit from all this. I think, as we were saying, it's like tools that have been set, more like a foundation that has been set that we can use to see how then we can benefit, especially communities at the grassroots. So I'd say it was, well, I'm saying a success, and I'm feeling weird saying that it was a success, but I'd say it wasn't a total failure. It wasn't a total failure. There were quite some wins in there.
All right, thank you so much, Gertrude, and also to my guest, Navin, for bringing your very strong insights to the program. I think in the end, it is safe to say that COP30, it did deliver a deal, but the deal was not what the world urgently wanted or expected. Many describe the final agreement as a small step rather than a leap. But on the bright side, though, like my guests have pointed out, the decision to develop a just transition mechanism offers real promise. But at the end of the day, one big lesson that I believe we can take from Belém is that at the end, climate talks must go beyond just this meetings in the hall, but it's all about how much the communities feel the impact. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Policy on the Go. If you were part of COP30 or you watched from wherever you are, be sure to leave your review in the comments on what you thought about COP30. Was COP30 a success or a failure from your perspective? I'm Tonya Gubanjo. Many thanks for watching. It's bye for now.